Welcome to the Real Powerhouse Podcast. I'm your host, BJ Gramillion, and today I have Josh Hadley with us from Hadley Designs. Josh is an incredible guy. And I'm not just saying that because he's my cousin, but it's funny. I'll tell you a little bit of background behind how I know Josh, and then we'll get into Josh and his background, and he can tell us a little bit more and fill in some of the blanks. But funny story to start off. Josh told I don't know how long ago it was. When did you start Hadley Designs?
Started back in 2015.
Okay. So around that time, I think I remember getting like an invitation or something like that in the mail. And you guys were saying, hey, we're starting this Hadley Design thing. And so I remember thinking, oh, that's cute. That's nice. It's probably a nice side hustle. At the time, Josh was working for American Airlines. Is that right?
Yep.
Okay, so living in Dallas, working for American Airlines, and I just thought, okay, that's fun. Like he's doing a nice little side hustle, might make a little bit of money here and there, but won't be anything exciting. So fast forward, I don't know, maybe a couple years later, I was talking to Josh about real estate, and Josh mentioned, just kind of in passing, almost, some of the discretionary income that he was pulling in. From this side hustle, which I think that by the time we were talking, you had left your job with American Airlines. And so I realized, holy smokes, this guy is really smart and he's figured it out clearly. And so it was fun to be like, wait a minute, what are you doing? Help me understand like what's going on. And so anyone that knows Josh, he's not going to be someone that's going to, brag by any means or pat himself on the back or anything like that. But Josh is an incredible dude, a very smart business mind. And so I'm excited to learn a little bit more because we haven't had a chance, honestly, to talk kind of about your journey and where you started and where you're at today with things. And so, Josh, welcome to the show, bud.
Hey, BJ, excited to be here. And hey, I would say the exact same words about yourself. You've been crushing it in the real estate space, and I've got a lot to learn from you. And I think the funny thing is, great minds think alike because you and I both came out with a podcast literally like at the same time. There must have been something in the water. But it's just like all of a sudden, both you and I are like, we got to start podcasts. And here we are on a podcast together. I love it.
I know. Okay. Well, Josh, tell us a little bit about, so I alluded to it, obviously you, well, I guess maybe let's start off with your family. Maybe tell us about, a little bit about your family life and, maybe the beginnings of your career and we'll go from there.
Yeah. So, we live in DFW, so Dallas Fort Worth area here. We've been here for 9 years. Originally, my wife and I grew up in Utah. We graduated from the University of Utah in 2014, and we moved here because I got a job with American Airlines, like you talked about. And so I'll kind of transition into like what led us into, starting Hadley Designs. And, I think there's a lot of failures and that we made along the way and a lot of mistakes that we've learned from. But we moved here, we're moving away from family, and it was a great opportunity for my wife and I to just like, there was nothing else but each other. Right. And so it allowed us to grow together. But the first question my wife asked as soon as we moved here was like, hey, should I go get a job, and what type of job should I go get? And in the meantime, she grew up as a child, like just loving art, and she would win multiple art contests. She's just very good at drawing, and she would win magazines, and she won like a greeting card contest that her card was like actually printed and shipped out and all that stuff.
Wow. Cool.
But she grew up, with the same mentality that I think most people get if they're into art and design and things like that. That's like, oh, there's no money in art. Don't waste your time on an art degree because that's not going to provide you with any money. Mm-hmm. And so she ended up going to school. She looked at doing pre-med. She looked at doing business. Then she ended up settling into early childhood education. But in and of itself, she didn't just love teaching either. And so as soon as we moved here, she was like, hey, do I go find a teaching job or do I go find something else? Well, in the meantime, she had been kind of studying graphic design stuff on the side. And I was like, hey, you know what? I've American Airlines, it's a steady income and it's providing a good, foundation for us right now. We don't need you to go find a job immediately. And so she continued to kind of experiment with graphic design work and ended up stumbling into like creating custom wedding invitations for her friends. And so she designed one of her friends' wedding invitations, and her friend was just like, these are incredible. Like, I know you said you were going to do this for free, but I have to pay you money for this. It's so good. And that's kind of where like the light bulb moment came on for both Becca and I. It's like, okay, maybe there is something to this. And so to make a long story short, that's where I started hustling. I joined probably 1,000 different like Facebook groups on Becca's account, and I would imitate as Becca into these like wedding, buy, sell, and trade Facebook accounts. And anybody that was like, hey, does anybody have any recommendations or ideas for wedding invitations? I would be messaging them. I'd be, sending them messages on Messenger, and just I had a whole like sales funnel sequence that was like copy and paste templates. I was like, oh, I just need to grab this message, send this, and I had a whole process. And so I was able to do that like in the evenings and during lunch at work, like because it was just like kind of like copy and paste. So we end up doing like $100,000 in revenue just our first year of like this experimentation of custom wedding invitations. And so it's like, oh, that was a lot of fun, right? The next year we did like 250,000, and we got to a point where like I had Becca's calendar booked like I think it was like 6 months in advance. Like people had to wait 6 months just to like start working with Becca. But the challenge was like we were already charging over $1,000 just to work with Becca, and Becca could only take on like a certain number of clients. Like otherwise she'd just be like tapped out. And so what led us into, kind of creating the stationary business that we did now was this whole understanding of like, okay, Becca's our bottleneck. We can kind of go two ways. We need to pivot the business to find something that can actually scale instead of working one-on-one with clients, or we need to go find other graphic designers that are just as good as you are, and then just have a bunch of graphic designers that work on our team, right? And finding a good graphic designer is like finding a needle in a haystack. And so we opted not to go that route. And I had heard about Amazon, right? And there were a bunch of courses pitching like, hey, make millions of dollars on Amazon. And so we had this idea that was like, hey, one of the things that people request a lot from these brides, they would come back to us. They're like, hey, can you design my bridal shower games or my bridal shower recipe cards? And it was like, that's super random, but it takes just as much time to design a recipe card as it does an invitation. So, but you're not going to pay $1,000. So yes, but no at the same time. So that's where the idea came from. It's like, well, what if we mass produce some of our top trending designs and we put those onto Amazon? And so we did that. That was the fall of 2016. And so we put on, I think there were 3 SKUs, came out with 3 SKUs. We sold out on all of them within like the first 2 months. And then from there, I was like, okay, there's something to this. We just generated $15,000 in profit just from mass producing 3 SKUs. Like, I think we could go rinse and repeat this. So to make a long story short, fast forward to 2023, we have over 1,300 SKUs now. We crossed 8 figures in our business last year. And so we're just continuing to come out with new products and continuing to expand the portfolio of stationary products that we offer.
Man, that's wild. That is such a cool journey. And I think that the first thing that I want to highlight about that I think is so cool is number one, I mean, you're not going to find a more supportive spouse, right? Like you flip the script on, okay, there's no money in art. Okay, wait, maybe there is. And then you went full on like, hey, I'm going to figure out a way to help you realize what you're passionate about and help you monetize that so that you can make it like your career, which is so cool. I don't know how many spouses would just, yeah. I mean, I know that I've heard some of these like Instagram, like influencers and those kind of things that I've heard, like the husband leaving their job to support their wife that is an influencer or whatever. But you more or less like were able to just create this business centered around your wife, and not just that, like it's not a side hustle, like this is a very sophisticated and profitable business that, as you mentioned, now has just crossed the 8-figure barrier, which is congratulations. That is a huge deal.
Thank you.
I think that is so cool to hear. Okay, so with that, um, I imagine that how many people are in your organization right now?
Yeah, so we have 25 team members right now.
Whoa. Okay. How does that look? Who does what?
Yeah, so we have project manager, we have supply chain managers, we have a product optimization manager, so that kind of runs more of like our Amazon strategy, along with like a PPC, Amazon PPC manager. So most of a bulk of our team is like focused on like supporting the Amazon business in terms of as soon as we launch a product, we've got a team. I think it's composed of like 10 people that are actively like monitoring our ads, monitoring, what the competition is doing, looking at our prices, testing different prices. We'll try to go up and see if, can we continue to raise our price without seeing, too much pullback in terms of, the velocity of sales. And so that's what's most exciting right now. We're just building that side of the business, because up until this point, it's just been launch the product and nobody's ever looked at it in the past. And so now actually having eyes on there, we're getting some massive like wins of just low hanging fruit because now somebody's like paying attention to it. And then the other side of the business where the project manager and supply chain manager are focused, and then research and development manager is in just like constantly identifying new product ideas, presenting those to Becca and I, and then we'll brainstorm like, hey, here are the types of designs that I think we could come out with. And, it ends up being like a whole 4-month process just from like idea to like getting something out onto Amazon. And so like, that's what we're just constantly in this cycle of like, what's new, what's coming down the pipeline. And then again, another team that's focused on just like, all right, keep the momentum going for everything that's previously been launched. But I love, managing a team and SOPs and processes. And that's what I share a lot on in my podcast is like, a lot of people can stumble upon like creating like a 7-figure business, especially in the e-commerce Amazon space. A lot of people you'll find like, hey, just me and a business partner, we're at 7 figures, but it's rare to hear anybody like cross into the 8 figures and beyond without having a team that can help them scale the business. And so the last 3 years have been all about like scaling the business. And it's been so much fun.
Man, yeah, and it's so accurate too, because I think that what you learn in business as you scaling actually, it's not as fun as it sounds, right? Like I think a lot of people are like, oh yeah, just pour gas on it and it'll just incrementally grow, and it'll be great. But what got you to where you are now is not going to be what's going to get you to the next step, or going from 7 figures to 8 figures. And a lot of times it's easy to go from 0 to $1 million, but then going from $1 million to 5 million and then 5 to 10. I mean, they're not in any way comparable. They're very, very different. And any business owner will tell you that, it is like night and day difference almost from what they had to do. What would you say would be the most difficult? Like you've experienced going from 0 to, let's say, 6 figures, and then from 6 figures to 7, and then from 7 to 8. What would you say was the hardest barrier for you to cross?
It's a really good question. It was going from the 7 figures. So this will kind of lead into, I'll open up a whole can of worms here for you that you could probe down into. So 2019 is when I left American Airlines. Okay. 2019, we did 5 million in revenue. And what's funny is like, I was at American Airlines, like I was there for a total of 5 years. Right. And I kept hanging on there as long as I could because the economy, from 2007, 2008, like it just kept going up, up, up. And I was like, surely there's going to be some type of recession or pullback in at some point, American Airlines is my safety net, right? But at the end of the day, like Hadley Designs was already generating much more income than even American Airlines was. But for myself, I just wasn't very, like, I'm generally risk adverse, right? And so I was just kind of like hanging on to this thing. And we wanted to grow the business, but we didn't know like what it would take to get there. And we kind of like started distracting ourselves with like diversifying. Like I was kind of so scared of like, hey, Amazon can suspend your account at any time. And it's like, well, I could watch, millions of dollars go away. And so like my wife and I spent so much time, like we created our website and started selling like digital versions of our products, like digital downloads that you could sell on Etsy. Long story short, like we spent basically all of 2019 focused on like, how do we generate income anywhere else other than Amazon, and kind of took our foot off the pedal here. And we probably spent over $500,000 just in trying to get something else going. And on Etsy, all we did, like the best we did was like $100,000 a year on Etsy. And so it's like we wasted all of this time. And then it leads us into COVID happens for our business, right? So COVID happens in 2020, March. We watch our business go from, we were doing 1,000 orders a day down to 100 orders a day if we were lucky. Wow. Because a lot of our stuff was centered around like parties and weddings and, baby showers and things like that. And those weren't happening during COVID, right? Mm-hmm. And we watched our business like just literally like go back to what was happening in the early days of like 2016, when it was like, we're excited to get 100 orders a day. And all of a sudden at that point, like we started to count, how much money do we have until we have to start closing shop? Like how many more months do we have to live? Right? Like that was hitting us right in our face. Well, as everybody knows, like COVID started to loosen up in the summer or so, but I mean, we were still a far cry from 1,000 orders a day. But it started, there was a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel. But here's the biggest blessing that we kind of gleaned from all of this. It was definitely probably the most challenging time as a business owner. And 2020, we end up doing less revenue, obviously, than we did in 2019. But it was challenging, but it was the wake-up call that I needed. Because all of a sudden, when I'm faced with like, hey, everything's starting to crumble, where do you want to spend your time and focus? And that was the pivotal point to where we said, okay, screw this stuff on Etsy, this website, anything else that we were kind of toying around with in terms of diversifying our income. We said, there's no sense in doing that. We had actually hired team members to support this like Etsy side of the business and all of that. And so we let them go and we said, all right, if we hire somebody, it should be about Amazon. Because with Amazon, whenever we come out with a new product, it's an ROI positive event for us. And so I was like, why have we been so blind and like trying to look the other way? Whereas if I would have just spent the last couple of years just like keep doubling down on Amazon, then we probably would have crossed the 8-figure mark, in 2020. But instead we took our eye off the ball. Well, 2020 happens, the realization sets in. And so the fall of 2020, we kind of throw out a prayer of like, we launched, I think it was like 3 or 4 new products, and they were geared towards like the educational, like homeschool space, because that was obviously trending. We're like, hey, let's just see if we could do something here. Well, that product immediately shot through the roof and quickly became one of the top bestsellers in the educational poster space, which ended up becoming our lifeline, which then ended up saying like, okay, there's something to this Amazon thing. Let's put all of our focus into Amazon. So what we did then is like, we started to kind of SOP out, standard operating procedure, all of the things that I would do to like identify new products on Amazon, how we go from idea to actually getting them launched, the keyword research. And as soon as we did that, then I started to hire team members that would become specialists in those areas, a project manager, R&D manager, PPC manager, etc. And that's where our business started to scale. So 2021, we did over 7.5 million, right? So real quick, like we shot back up. And then again, 2022, we crossed the 8-figure mark. And so it was just by focusing on, what levers can I pull in my business that will provide an outsized return on my efforts. And, before focusing on Amazon, I spent too much time focused on the wrong levers. And that was one of like the biggest lessons learned.
Yeah. And I think it's important to, look at that as like, maybe it wasn't a failure that we went the Etsy route. It was, and I always reference this, that there was a talk by one of the members of our church that I always reference, Jeffrey R. Holland, where he talked about, the wrong road. Right. And
Yep.
so sometimes, he was going down this road with his son and they're camping, and he asked his son, which road do you think we should go down? His son said, after praying about it, we should go right. So they went right. And then within, a mile or so, they were like, clearly this is the wrong way to go. So, they had to reverse, turn around, and then get back to the fork in the road and go left, which ended up being the right way. And his son was perplexed and confused. Why did that happen? And then he told his son, look, I think that, that actually was an answer to our prayer. But we just needed to know for a fact that that was absolutely the wrong way to go, so that we could be confident in, the direction that we're going now, which is 100% where you're at. And so I've heard, and I wanted to ask you this question, because I'm not familiar with the Amazon space and the marketplace, but I have heard a lot of people with those concerns, like, hey, it's never great to rely on another company that any given time could change the rules to their game, and then you're out of business, you're wiped out. And so what is your answer to that now at this point, now that you're all in on Amazon? Are you still concerned about that? And how does that look?
Yeah, that's a great question. The quick answer to that is no. I'm not worried about that, because we're playing by Amazon's rules first and foremost. But then secondly, I've thought a lot about this. Every business, especially at least in the e-commerce space, every business, you are going to be reliable on something else. Okay. If you have your own e-commerce store and you're generating all of your traffic from Facebook ads and you're just printing money on Facebook, well, guess what happened when they did the iOS update and change, right? Their businesses fell apart, right?
Yep.
Same thing if you are generating all of your SEO traffic from Google and Google changes their algorithm overnight and all of your SEO just goes to nothing, right? It's the same thing right now with like AI, right? AI, is that going to, it's changing the way people search, right? They're utilizing more like, I'm just going to go straight to Chat GPT. I'm not Googling this anymore, right? Well, now people are losing out on additional traffic, right? So no matter what business you are in, I feel like there's always going to be a weak point, right? And no matter what it is. So from my perspective, it's just been like, hey, make hay while the sun is shining and just double down on it and just maximize whatever you can while the opportunity presents itself. And as entrepreneurs know this, we are very, flexible and adaptable people. And as soon as the puck moves somewhere else, that's where I'm going to be skating towards, right? And so I think that's what you need to focus on as an entrepreneur. Like one thing that I will continue to tell every business entrepreneur that I speak with is, if you've already found success with something, keep driving that home until you have squeezed all of the juice out of that opportunity. And I love, the analogy that you were sharing there with the talk from Jeffrey R. Holland in terms of like, sometimes you need to go down the wrong route so that you can know you're on the right path. But most importantly, it's having confidence and not comparing yourself to anybody else. So what that there's another stationery brand that does millions of dollars on Etsy? That's not my game plan. Focus on what you're good at, understand that, and just continue to double down.
Great answer. And I also think too that this was a mistake of mine for a decade, that I look back on and I regret. I tried immediately when I got into real estate. I went wide because I looked at, there are so many ways I can make money in real estate, and I can, and there was always a new way that people were making money. whether it's short-term rentals, right? They would come around. That was a shiny object, and fix and flipping and wholesaling, and so I'm like, well, I don't want to just do one of those. I can do all of those. And so, you end up being this jack of all trades, master of none. And what ends up happening, honestly, is you realize that you are shallow and you don't have like what is it that makes you special? People will not go to you if you're a jack of all trade. They will go to you. You guys immediately, again, and I don't know if you did this intentionally or what, but you guys, decided, okay, we're going to get into this space. And then you never deviated from it. Cause I know Amazon, you can make you can make money, and you can sell any product, right?
Oh,
But you stuck to what you knew really well, and you have not deviated, from that. So and I guess maybe I'm putting words in your mouth. Have you deviated from that? Because to my knowledge, it seems like you've only been in that space really. But have there been other products that you have tried out maybe that haven't worked out?
yeah, it's a good question. So no, we haven't deviated from like the stationary space, right?
Yeah.
But now one of the vision that we have for the brand is to be able to acquire other design-based product brands, right?
Mm.
What we have learned over the years is that Becca is an incredible designer. She can run circles around anybody else. And we see that just because as soon as she puts something onto Amazon, I don't have to have like amazing like launch tactics or hidden hacks to like get things to shoot through the roof.
Mm.
It's just because her designs speak for themselves. And so we see as like, holy cow, like imagine all the opportunities that are ahead of us. But to your point, uh, you know, you have to be diligent in knowing like taking the right steps at the right time so we don't go too wide, so that tomorrow we're not doing wallpaper and we're doing mugs and then we're also doing clothing at the same time, and now it's like we've just kind of diluted
Mm.
what we're known for, right? And I think that every business, just every year, you're looking to make those incremental improvements to continue to grow.
Yeah, man, that's great. Yeah, and the last thing I would say about that, there's this analogy called Sheehan's wall. Have you heard of that analogy?
I haven't.
So essentially, what it is in marketing is like, okay, you need to be able to break through some wall, break through some barrier, so that you are known for something, right? Like so that, but the first thing is you need to break through that wall. You need to be known for that. And then once you've achieved something, once you are known for something and you are an expert in your industry at something, doesn't matter what it is. Once you become an expert, then you have the ability, to go wide if you decide to,
Mm,
right? And so you'll see that with people that have made it, entrepreneurs that are like, hey, I want to, go off and try this or that. They have the ability to do that because they have a following, like the Kardashians, for example. I know that's a horrible example, but I think all of us know who they are because of the reality TV show, and that once they hit it, they could do whatever they want. If they want to launch a product for clothing or perfume or whatever it is, it's going to hit just because they're going to do one tweet or one post about it and everyone's going to buy it. But that's because they broke through that barrier and now they just have a reputation, right? And so people want, for whatever reason, I guess, to
yeah.
buy whatever the Kardashians, are putting out. But
Well,
um
and I think that one of the most important things, though, is like you've generated this audience, right?
yep.
And you know who your customer is, right? And so I think at the end of the day, that's why Amazon's done so well, right? Because they are the most, customer centric company on the earth, right? That's their mission.
Mhm.
And so, likewise, if you focus on the customer and you let them tell you what it is that they want next, it will lead to much better results than you trying to just follow, like, oh, this is what I want to do, and I'm going to shove it down my customers' throats. It's constantly surveying your audience, asking them, what else would you like to see? And those are some of the best products that we've launched. And, that's ultimately how we got into, the educational like poster space, is people were asking for like, hey, do you have anything for the classroom? It's like, oh, haven't thought about that. Let's go look at that space, right? And so
Mhm.
we're constantly like just trying to tune in to the customer. Business is all about serving people. And if you can understand that your job as a business owner is to serve your customers and to serve your team, then that's the magic sauce. Like, that's it. It's as simple as it is. And the better you are at serving others, the more successful your business will be.
So well said. Um, Man, this has been great. Okay. So I have three questions that I ask everyone. It's like our lightning round to finish up the podcast. But then I have a bonus question at the end that I actually have been wanting to ask you about, but have saved for the podcast. Before we get to that last bonus question, let's start off with the first question, which is, what is a podcast or book that you've read in the past year that has been really impactful for you?
All right. I'm going to go with one of the most recent books that I've been listening to, which has given me some really good mindset shifts. All right. So this one is called 10X is Easier Than 2X by Dan Sullivan and Benjamin Hardy.
Love it.
Um,
Benjamin Hardy.
Great book.
Yep.
Fantastic. Like, as an entrepreneur, like being able to understand, like, yeah, it is so much better to focus on those 10X opportunities than just the 2X opportunities. I've had some fantastic mindset shifts as I've been listening to that book.
Guys, if anyone that's been listening to the show knows I'm a massive Ben Hardy fan, and so anything he writes, I would recommend it. And so that's another. I think that's his most recent book, right? That he just came out with. So yep, definitely echo that. So perfect. Okay, what would you say was one of the biggest growth years that you've had?
2020, because we got literally kicked to the ground and thought the business was done for. We were counting up the number of days we had left and trying to think of like, how do we survive? And then the pivot that came from it. That was exactly what we needed. It was the hardest time in our business, but it also opened the door to new opportunities that we never would have realized had we not gone through that experience. And it just all goes back to, I truly believe that like everything happens for a reason, and that all of us have like a specific plan in life with unique traits, skills, and abilities. And we're at the specific area we're living in at the specific time for a very specific purpose. And our job is to go find out what that is. And, one of the biggest things that I've learned recently is like, stop comparing yourself to others. It's so much easier said than done. But as I go to, different mastermind groups and I hear somebody else has a $100 million e-commerce brand and they're crushing it on Amazon, I feel bad about myself. I'm like, why am I not there? Right? What am I doing wrong? But at the end of the day, I know I'm on the path that I need to be on. If I were meant to have a $100 million brand right now, I would have already been there. But I'm going down the course that I need to refine who I am as an individual. And I think like, if you have that approach in life and you believe in, a God that has a higher plan for you, like you can go through life with so much more confidence and less stress in general. And so that's been, the biggest turning point for me is that 2020 year.
So cool. Yeah. And I think it's so important for everyone just to realize that we all have a superpower and we all have this God-given, trait that typically there's one or two that kind of separate us. Right. And so it's important for us to figure out what that is. And then once you do figure that, what that is, you need to lean into it and go all in. And then in business, what I've realized for myself at least has been, okay, if I'm really, really good at sales, I need to make sure that anything else that I'm doing that's distracting, that's not sales, I got to offload it. I got to give that to someone else. I got to delegate. It's who, not how. And then, just focus in on that one thing. And if you can laser focus on your talent, it's going to set you apart, and you're going to be amazed, at how quickly you can grow just by, focusing on whatever that talent is. And I love that, when I ask that question, everyone that looks back on, man, that was the worst year ever. It was so hard. And a lot of people have said, 2020 and 2022 was for us, it was a difficult year. Everyone looks back on that though, and they're like, man, what a blessing that was. And that's what separates
Mm.
the successful entrepreneurs from the failures in business. It's, they look at it as, okay, what can I learn? How can I grow? And what do I need to change and adapt? And if you do that, it's going to 10x your business, which, has happened for you guys. So great share. Okay. The last question that I have is, if you were able to go back, 10 years from now, or I guess rewind, knowing what you know now, what's a bit of advice that you would give yourself if you could go back 10 years?
Man, that's a really good question. Um, if I were to go back 10 years, I would tell myself to, just focus in on that Amazon space, right? And look to scale a business quickly. I think I played it too safe. I think a component of why it took us as long as it did to cross the 8-figure mark is because I kept playing it way too safe. I held on to my job at American Airlines for 5 years, probably 4 years longer than I really needed to. And if I would have, at the time though, I didn't have the expertise to know how to hire, right? And to create SOPs. And so all of that was gained with experience and time. So it's kind of putting the cart before the horse. But if I could take what I know now and go back 10 years, oh man, the Amazon game 10 years ago, so easy. Now it's a lot harder. But I think just, I love, as I think about that question though, I love being able to say, you know what, but I'm comfortable with where I'm at right now as well. And I'm grateful that, yeah, I wish I could have done X, Y, and Z differently at that time. But like, I wasn't there. I didn't have the mindset or the skills or the experience that I needed at that point. And that's why I say I go back to like, there was a plan and laid out. And I think, yeah, arguably could I have gone through it quicker if I was a little less risk adverse and was willing to just jump in when I saw success. Yeah, that would probably be the biggest advice.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Okay. So another question, I guess I lied. This is my last question, but I'm curious what your take is, because our last conference that I went to with, we have a mastermind group that I'm a part of for real estate, and the topic of conversation, everyone was talking about AI, right? And
Yeah.
so Chat GPT is just every other conversation I had was, it seemed like, around AI. So what are your thoughts on AI? How will that impact your business, if at all? And does it make you nervous? Are you excited about it? Just curious what your overall thoughts are on it.
Yeah. Love it. I love AI, right? I think everybody is already, putting together the analogy of this is exactly what the internet was back in 1994, right?
Mm-hmm.
When the internet came out. This is going to change our world in ways that we cannot comprehend right now. Just as if we were to go back in 1994 and we're like, what is this internet thing? It's so slow and it's not perfect. It takes forever to load a web page. Why would I do that when I could just go, I could go to the store and buy something? Why would I risk putting my credit card online? That sounds stupid, right?
Mm-hmm.
Those were all the things that people were saying back then. We are at the very beginning stages of AI. And so I am excited. Yes. Are there risks, potential threats to our business? Like, think about Midjourney and all of the new, like, creative, like AI softwares that are out there right now. Is that a threat to our business? I don't know. Could be. And so we are actively, like, we're at the cutting edge of it. If it does change the game to where it's spitting out designs that are better than Becca is, then our job is to transition to say, like, perfect. Well, it's solved the problem. Now we have 100,000, graphic designers at our fingertips at a moment's notice, right? And so my recommendation, and this has been something that I've been talking to our team about as well. All the newspapers and headlines love this. They sell clicks by saying, oh, AI is going to impact millions of jobs over the next 5 years. Millions of people are going to lose their jobs to AI. False. What's going to happen is that people's jobs and their roles are going to change. right? And if you are not adopting AI, the people that are adopting AI are going to have 10 times the output that you do. And so, as a business, think about that. If you're not adopting an AI first strategy right now and figuring out ways to incorporate AI into everything you do, the businesses that are going to be 10x what you are doing in terms of your output. This is not something that you can turn a blind eye to, much like I think all of us would laugh at the people back in 1994 that were like, that internet thing, that's not worth it. I'm not going to focus on it. I'm good with my brick and mortar store how it is. Um, Times change. And just, goes back to the conversation you asked earlier. Am I worried about Amazon? Amazon's always going to continue to change. My job is just to adopt with it and try to incorporate and roll with the punches as they come out and continue to learn and innovate. That's what every entrepreneur's job is. And that is something I think unique in every entrepreneur's DNA is like, if you were to go back into the hunting and gathering times, we are the hunters, right? We are the people out foraging, trying to figure out like, hey, how are we going to survive? We got to bring home some meat. We got to feed the family, right? And if there's, no game in this area, then we're going to go find it somewhere else. So you just got to continue to adapt. That's what our ancestors have done. That's why we're here where we're at. So adapt with AI, incorporate it. Don't turn a blind eye to it. Get excited by it. And most importantly, have your team focus on it because they know intimately more of like the day-to-day problems that they're facing in their own role. And so that's something that we continue to drill down with all of our team members is like, I want each of you on a weekly basis presenting something new that you have learned about AI that can help make your job easier. We're not trying to replace you. We're trying to say you need to 10x your results because if you don't, we're going to hire somebody else that has already adopted AI into what they're doing.
Such a great answer. And that's a perfect way to end. And I think that to your point, what came to my mind was think back. The reason why I asked, like, if you go back 10 years, what would you do differently? Obviously, for me, similarly, like, hey, I would go into Amazon. I would go all in, obviously, on real estate. Had I known it was going to go meteoric, right? Get as much money as I possibly could find and just dump it in real estate. But how many people do you talk to that are like, man, I wish that I was around when YouTube first started because my audience would be huge, or Instagram or Facebook or TikTok or the internet, and so here is your opportunity. So Chat GPT is going to change the world. We know that AI is going to change the world. And so if you want to be an early adopter and you go all in on it, well, guess what? You don't have to be that schmuck that says, man, I wish I was around when that first came out because I would be here. Now's the opportunity for all of us to say, okay, we all have a level playing field. Let's figure out how to utilize this tool for our gain. And it's all about adapting. So great answer. Appreciate your insight on that. Josh, this has been a blast. I appreciate you coming on the show, and hopefully we'll be able to do it again here soon down the road. So thanks again for coming on.
Yeah. Thanks again, BJ. This was a lot of fun.